Okay, so we're back. It's lesson 6, part 2. And what we've implemented basic authentication, but we haven't really done anything with authorization. So anybody can, even though we're controlling access to our products and categories, really anybody can create an account for themselves and then manage the products and categories. So we want to now add that second level around authorization. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to go to our database and we manually need to create a couple of roles in the database. So I've put a script on D2L for you. So I just want to take these first two lines. I'll put them in the paste of code as well. So we're going to create two roles. An ID of 1 with the name of administrator and an ID of 2 with the name of customer. Okay, so you can grab these two lines and I'm going to execute them. So I'm just going to make a new query against my database in Management Studio. I'm just going to paste those in. And then I'll click the execute button. So this is going to create two roles in the DB for us. If I want to check my ASP.NET roles table, I can just right click it, select my top 1,000 rows. I'm not worried about these other two columns, normalized name, concurrency stamp. Really only need the ID and the name. So what I want to do now is I want to register a new account. Actually, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete that original user 1 account I have, and I'm going to create a new account, and then we're manually going to make that first user the administrator. And after that, we want to customize the register page so anyone else that registers automatically becomes a customer. So we need to modify some of the code in our application. Okay, so run that SQL script. That's on D2L. It's also in paste of code. And make sure that your ASP.NET roles table now has two roles. ID 1 for administrator, ID 2 for customer. I can actually leave that user 1 account alone. We're not going to work with it, but I'll just leave it alone for now. So now what we need to do is go back to our startup file and we need to add this line. So it tracks authentication by default, but it's not tracking roles by default. So we need to configure identity to also manage our user roles. So I'm going to go back to my startup file. And it's important that I add this line of code before line 34. We need to enable roles. So I'm going to add roles, and we're going to add our identity user role. Okay. So I'm going to save that. I'll paste it for you here as well. So lines 1 and 3 we already had, but we're adding in line 2. So we need to configure our site to also manage roles. The next thing we want to do once we've done this is we want to manually configure our registration page temporarily to save any new registrations to the administrator role. We're going to create one account this way. Then we're going to change that code so that for all future registrations, the users are automatically saved to the customer role instead. So that way we'll have one administrator, and then we can create some additional customer accounts. So let's look at how we do that. So I've added line 34 to my startup file. And then I'm going to go to Solution Explorer. And I'm going to expand areas. And under here, we've got identity and we've got pages. So what this allows us to do, you may be wondering, I had somebody in my class yesterday say, I wanted to modify, I know I have this register and login page, and I wanted to modify them, but I couldn't find them in my project. I looked everywhere. I tried, find and replace. I could never find these files, yet obviously they're here somewhere. So they are here, but they're basically hidden by identity. Okay. Maybe go back and... Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. This should be identity role. Wrong class. That's why. Let me repaste that into my paste bin. We're going to change identity user to identity role. So grab that new code. Identity user should be identity role. So make that change in your startup file. It should be your line 34. So I'm not going to change the view. I'm not going to change the front end of this page, but I want to change the code that runs when the register button is clicked. So where is that code and how do we find it and how do we make changes to it? So in Solution Explorer, I'm going to go to Areas, Identity, and Pages, and I'm going to right-click the Pages folder. And I'm going to choose Add New Scaffolded Item, which will bring up our scaffold dialog box. And under here on the left, I'm going to choose Identity. When I pick Identity on the left, I only get one option in the middle, which also says Identity. Adds code required for using .NET Core Identity in the application. So pick Identity twice, and then click the Add button. I'll go over that again in case anybody missed it. Under Solution Explorer, we're going to open up Areas, Identity, and Pages. We're going to right-click Pages and choose Add New Scaffolded Item. I'm going to pick Identity on the left, and I'm going to pick Identity in the middle. And then I'll click Add. We'll let this run, and then Visual Studio is going to give us all of the available pages that come with identity. So we're going to use our existing layout. I don't want all these pages. The page that I want is account register. So the second last item in the third column on the right. So you can see all the different templates that come for managing identity. Things for example, logging in with a recovery code, resetting passwords, two-factor authentication. All of these templates are already here if we want to use them. We're going to keep it fairly simple. So I'm just going to pick account register, and then I have to choose my database connection, which is our application DB context. So make sure I pick that drop down. So I'm using the shared layout template that we always use. I've checked account register, and I've picked our application DB context. Once I've got those options, I'll click add. I'll leave the screen up for a few seconds. If you need more time, you need to catch up, please let me know. So I'm going to click add now. And this is going to add a couple of files into the project that we could modify. It's going to add the register.cs HTML view if we want to change anything in the UI. There's also going to be a CS file attached to it. There's no controller, but the CS file contains all of the code that runs when a user clicks the register button. And that's what we want to modify. So we'll let the scaffold run for a minute. Should be almost finished. It opens a text file that talks about scaffolding.net identity. So if you want to read more about it, there's a link here to the documentation. And now if I go back to Solution Explorer, under Pages, I now have a folder called Account. And under here, you can now see I've got a register.cs HTML. So this is the view. So if we wanted to change anything on the input, like if we wanted a message laying out, for example, the password rules, we could add it here. You'll also notice there's a little black triangle beside it. If I click that, I can now see the same file name, but with a .cs extension. So this is our C#, our server-side code file that processes this form. So I'm going to click on that and open it up. So we can see the allow anonymous that makes this page public. And there's some properties set up. Here are our password validation rules that are password. So if we wanted to change the minimum password length, let's say from 6 to 8, we could change it here. And then starting on line 71, this is the post method. This is the method that processes a new registration. So we're going to leave all the code here. So on line 77 and 78, this is where our new user account actually gets created. It creates a new identity user object with the email address. And then it uses this user manager class, hashes the password, and when line 78 runs, our new user account is saved to the ASP.NET users table. The code below is for sending confirmation if there is one. And eventually at the end, we sign the user in automatically. So what we want to do is add above this code, if our result succeeds, if the new user gets created, we want to save the new user to the administrator role. This is just going to be temporary. So we're not going to keep this code here. We're going to add the new user as an administrator once, And then we're going to change the role so all other users are now saved as customers instead. So in here, I'll call it role result equals, and we can use our existing user manager class. And there's a method here called add to role async. Oops, and this is an asynchronous call, so it needs the keyword await. Whoops, two parameters, which user. We're adding our new user to the administrator role. And this keyword here, administrator, it's got to match exactly what we put in the database. So I'm going to save this. I'll add it to the paste bin for you. So this is line 81 and 82. Okay, so there's the code you need. Take the new user and add them to the administrator role. So I'm going to try this out. I'm going to create a new administrator account, and I'm going to recommend we all use the same username and password, because once we secure the site, we're going to need this login every week. So the easiest thing is I'm going to recommend we all just use the same admin login. That way no one has to worry about remembering it. Okay, so I've added this code here to my register, and I want to try it. So here are the credentials I'm going to use. I'll put them in the chat. So once you've added this code, we're going to use this credential, admin@gc.ca, and the password will be test with a capital T, 123 $. So I've put those credentials in the chat. It follows the password rules. And if we all have this same account, no one has to worry about forgetting their password and then creating a new account later. So I'm going to go to register. Yep. Okay. Did I spell it right? Oh, you know what? I think it's because of this normalized name. Yeah. Okay, we're going to run a quick update here. That's why. I need to run a quick query. I'll paste these in a minute. Okay. So we need to run those two update commands in my database on the ASP.NET roles table. So I'll now try in my register again. Okay, I guess I'm going to need Oh, I'll just delete it, and I'll delete my user and do it again. I'm going to delete all my users. I'll recreate them. I'll delete from my users. I'll try again. Okay, so now I'm logged in as admin. And if I look in ASP.NET user roles, my first user is now in role ID 1, which is administrator. I should fix that script on D2L. So I deleted all my users and I registered again once I fixed my code. Now I don't want to keep this code here because if I keep it, anyone who signs up is an administrator. I only want one admin account. So I'm now going to change this line 82. I'm going to change it from administrator to customer. And I'm going to create 2 customer accounts now. So I'll have 1 administrator and 2 customers. I'll use the same password for everybody to keep it simple. So once you've run the SQL queries that are in the chat, register again as admin at gc.ca. And then you can check that in ASP.NET users, you have a username admin at gc.ca. And in ASP.NET user roles, you have 1 user that's in role ID 1. Once you've got 1 administrator account, you can change this line that we added on line 82 of our register page. We can change the role from administrator to customer. So all subsequent users will be in the customer role instead of the administrator role. So I'm going to register 2 more times with customer accounts. So I'm going to log out. And I'm going to register as customer 1 at gc.ca. I'll use the same password, test123 $. And now when I register, it's created a new account, and I want to check in the database that this customer is in role ID 2. This user is a customer, not an administrator. So I'll go back to Management Studio, check my user list. I've got 2 users now, admin and customer 1. And in ASP.NET user roles, I've also got my first one is in role 1, and my second user is in role 2. So now we've got 2 different user accounts and they're in 2 different roles. So now we should be able to properly implement authorization. I'm going to create one more customer account. That'll be helpful later. So I'm going to register again, this time as customer 2, and I'll use the same password. Well, I put it in as customer instead of customer 2. That's okay. So now I've got 3 users in my ASP.NET users. And I've got 3 user roles. One of them is an administrator. The other 2 are customers. So all the accounts and roles that we need, they're set up now. The problem is our application is still just performing authentication, right? Even as a customer, I can see the links to categories and products, and I could go in and make any changes I want as a customer. Not exactly secure. So we want to change the security rules that we implemented in the first part of the class. In the first part of class, we were only concerned with authentication. As long as you were logged in, you could see these links and you could perform create, read, update, and delete in these controllers. It doesn't really make sense. It's not secure to do that. So we now want to restrict access to both the link visibility as well as the controller methods themselves to administrators only. So we're not just checking for authentication, we're also checking authorization. So we're going to go back to our layout, and we want to change the if statement here that shows or hides the links. So we'll go back to our layout, and I don't want to check if the user is authenticated. What could I check instead? You can actually see it in the little context menu. So how could we check the user's authorization level? Right, Stella. So I'm going to pick if user.isInRole administrator. So this means even a customer who's logged into the site won't see these links. Being logged in isn't enough. The user also has to be in the administrator role. Okay, so I'm going to change that in my layout. We're just changing the if statement. So now if I refresh, when I'm logged in as a customer, my links should disappear here. So I no longer see them even though I'm logged into the site. If I'm an administrator, as an admin user, I now see these links. As a customer, they're gone. Yep. Line 32. we use if user dot is in role, and we've got to spell it exactly. So in my database, the value of the role is administrator with a capital A. If I do it this way, let's see what happens. So if I change it to a capital A, here in Chrome, I'm an administrator. Right? So those links aren't visible because the role starts with a capital. So these roles, when we're referring to them, they're case sensitive. I fix that up, my links will come back here. So now our links are shown or hidden properly, but as a customer, I can still actually load the controller. I can call any method as the controller as an authenticated user. So we now need to modify the code we wrote in the controllers, where it was just checking authentication, it now needs to check authorization. So in the categories controller, up here on line 15, I'm going to add roles equals, and then in quotes. Now this could just be a comma separated list. If let's say we have like a super admin role, we would just put in, super admin, something like that, if both of these roles existed in the database. So we'll say to administrator users only. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy that line to the products controller, because logically, only an administrator should have access to both of these. So in my products controller, I'm going to do the same thing. I don't just want an authentication check. Being logged in isn't enough to access the methods in the controller. The user also has to be in the administrator role. Customers can't access these. So I'll save those. Paste it for you here. So this will go at the top of both classes. So now in Firefox as a customer, I should be blocked from accessing anything except the category details link. So I'll refresh my list of categories logged in as a customer, and now I get access denied. So it doesn't take me to the login screen. I'm already logged in, but I don't have access to the resource. If I go to products, I should get the same result. Access denied. As an administrator, no problem. I can still go anywhere inside my controllers. So we have access at both a controller level and at this granular method by method level, where we can decide, we can set both authentication and or authorization rules around who is allowed in. We're just going to do one last thing here. So as a customer, we've now set out the proper authentication. We've got a couple of different kinds of users. We've set up authorization rules, so our administrators can modify the product catalog and customers can't. The last thing we'll do is I just want to change this page. So this is still our dummy page with our list of categories. We want to get rid of this, And what I want to do is kind of start the shopping experience, that when a user clicks, excuse me, store, we should display the actual list of categories to the user in kind of a nicely formatted page. And this page will be public. We don't want to make it, we want to make it so most e-commerce sites, you can shop anonymously. You don't have to register and log in until you go to checkout and pay. So that's what we're going to implement. So we've already got this store controller with an index view here. So I'm going to open that up. This will be the last thing we'll do today. We're almost done. So under controllers, let's open up the store controller. We wrote this code way back in like lesson 2, I think. I'm going to comment out our mock data. So I'm going to comment out that code. And instead of making 10 pretend categories, we want to use the category model in the database now to fetch our actual list of categories. So our store controller needs our database connection. Doesn't have it right now. And we're going to need a constructor that instantiates an instance of our connection. So we'll set up an instance of our connection. Okay, so this code is going to go at the top of our controller. Okay. So we're creating a connection variable, and in our constructor, we're accepting an instance of our connection to connect to the database. So now in our index view, we're going to use the categories DB set. We're going to write a simple query. We'll order by our category name. So I've replaced all of the code to create our mock categories with an actual query that uses the database. So our index method, I'll paste it in. Our index method will now use live data rather than fake data. So let's try this out. We'll see what result it gives us. We're almost done for today. So I'm going to go back to the store link. And now instead of our fake categories, this should query, sure. Yep. Thanks for letting me know. There's the link. So now we've got our real categories. And now I'm just going to reformat this page so it looks a little better. And we can remove the add a category link. Customers can't use that link. So we're going to remove it. So I'm going to open up our store index and make a few changes. And we'll call it a day. So I've added the database connection and the constructor. We've commented out our mock list of 10 categories, and we've replaced it with an actual query in the database that fetches our category data in ascending order by name. So our last step is to go down to our views and store. We built this quite a while ago. I'm going to open up the index view. I'm basically going to take out everything after line 3. We'll delete it all. And I'm going to use Bootstrap to kind of format this in a nicer way rather than just in a bulleted list. We've just got a list here. If this list gets really long, doesn't look great to customers, we're going to do this instead. And again, I'll put it in the paste bin. So if I refresh, my category link's going to be gone, and our bulleted list should now get changed to a Bootstrap card view. So now it looks like this. So this is our main shopping page in our store for our customers. So it's still getting the list of categories, but it's presenting it in a different way. Okay, so I'll paste that in here. So this goes in views, store, index.cshtml. So here's how we want to leave it for today. So we've got the beginnings of the store. We have 2 different pages that display our list of categories. For customers, they see the categories this way. For administrators, they see the categories this way, so they can manage them. Customers see them this way, so that they can shop. So we'll work more on the store in a couple of weeks. This was a good place for us to start. We've got the main page. Next week, what we also want to do, I want to give you assignment 2, and I want to look at integrating third-party logins as well. We also need to talk a bit about SSL next week. We talked about it briefly last semester, but we should go over it again. So those are all the changes to our store today. Does anybody have any questions before we break for the week? I will also push up to GitHub now as well. So you can see we're making progress with our store.